Welcome back to another solo episode. And this one is again on YouTube. Are you guys so proud of me that I'm continuously showing up on YouTube now that I said I would for my solo episodes? I don't know if anyone's watched them, but I know there has been a couple people, and it is crazy it's taken this long, but here I am doing the thing that I say I am going to do. You guys, today's episode is 150. And today is going to be a look back, a celebration of 150 episodes, because I'll be honest, 150 episodes is a freaking lot. 150 episodes to show up, and not only for me, but for you guys to be listening to them. Like, I would love to know if anyone has listened to all 150 episodes. I don't know if it's possible, but if you are someone out there who has 100% binged every single solitary one of these podcasts, please send me a message. I am going to gift you with something. I have no idea, but I feel like part of me is like, there's no way it's possible. But then there's another part of me that's like, well, I know that I have done that with people's podcasts. You guys know I'm a huge fan of the Calm Down podcast with Carissa Thompson and Erin Andrews. Fucking massive fan of those girls in that podcast. And I would absolutely die to have either one of them or both of them on my podcast. Perhaps one day it will actually happen. I used to say that I have binged all of Danica Patrick's podcast, but I've kind of slowly weaned off of her podcast. Sometimes her guests are like really resonate with me, and sometimes they don't. So perhaps that's the way that you feel about this podcast. But either way, if you have listened to 1 or 150, I am unbelievably grateful for you, because we started this podcast back in February. We started, I think, February 1st, 2021, which feels like 100,000 years ago, but it also feels like just yesterday. And I know that you guys are probably can resonate with that and put yourself in the story in some regard. You're just like, oh my God, time goes way too fast. Did you guys ever have a parent who was always like, time goes so fast when you get old? My dad, love my dad so much. He's like one of my favorite people on the planet. And he always used to tell me, Chris, when you get old, time goes so fast. And, I didn't really want to believe him. And now I believe him. Like, my biggest fear is running out of time. I think that's why I wake up so early. Mind you, I go to bed really early, so I can't be that afraid of it. But yes, time just goes by so fast. And today's episode is going to be a look back. You guys know I am not very good at notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you will see my chicken scratch, which I cannot read, but we're going to do my best, because I really, really want this to be an episode where we look back. Hopefully, if this is one of your first episodes, hello, I am so grateful that you're here. Come say hi on YouTube, come say hi on the podcast, come say hi on social media, on Instagram where I hang out, or on my text message community. Really, it's interesting. I talk a lot about sending me a text message. If you guys have heard this like 1,000 times, 501-222-3362. Text me the word podcast, text me the word coach, just text me the word hi. And I promise you, it's me. In the online space where I exist, in the coaching space, so many people are huge fans of email marketing. Again, I'm a big fan. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of people on our email list. But I can firmly tell you, and I'm not, worried about saying this, our open rate on emails isn't that much, because a lot of people don't look at emails anymore. Our emails is, by the way, our emails have gotten so much better. I'm going to talk about this on this podcast, kind of a look back at the last basically 150 episodes. But something that's happened recently in my business is my longtime assistant, Ricky, is no longer working for us. She has taken a full-time position, heartbroken, because she was like literally with me for over 2.5 years. I loved her so much. I still love her, obviously. So happy that she's found a new position. She is actually still doing this podcast. So yes, we have a podcast team. So basically, like, if you guys don't know what our podcast looks like, from day one, we have had the same podcast editors. So shout out to Kevin and Belle and his team. Thank you so much for always doing such a fantastic job. You guys, I am a very type A anal person, if you don't know, and I always get my shit done on time, submitted. And guess what? They do the exact same thing. Over the last 2.5 years of doing this podcast, there has been very few mix-ups with this podcast, and I'm so grateful for that. I always try to do my job. They do their job really fantastic. And Ricky, who now just continues to do our podcast, SEO, our graphics. If you guys don't know, but on my website, ChristinaLaCure.com, I bet you half of you don't even know my real name. You probably just know me by B Christina, but my name is Christina LaCure. And if you go to my website, ChristinaLaCure.com/podcast, every single podcast episode we have done is on there. You can read the show notes and it is SEO linked. And so this is something that we've done. We've really put a lot of effort into our SEO effort, AKA a lot of money. And over the last couple of years, we've had Tiffany, she used to do it, and now Ricky's has taken it over for probably at least the last year. I'm super, super grateful to my team for doing that. But we have a new member of our team, Jess, who's doing a whole bunch of things. But all of that to be said is I really want to connect with you. And I know that a lot of people don't do email, but Jess has done a brand new fabulous email. So if you're on our email list, you have probably seen it. Our email is now new. It's like shiny. We're adding all new things. We're adding ways to work with me. We're adding like personal touches from me. We're adding like basically what's going on in my week. We're adding the email, or we're adding the podcast. But all of that to be said, I know a lot of people don't do email. So I am a big fan of a text message community, because I actually feel like I text my girlfriends all the time. I text my friends all the time. I text my husband. I'm a big text message person. I know some people don't text message very well. I have a couple. What are you guys? I'd love to know. Are you the type of person who like, there are two specific people in this world, and I'd love to know. Please, please, please send me a message or send me a text message and let me know. There's two types of people in this world. One who you can text back, who will text back within like fucking 30 minutes maximum, right? Like I am your girl who like, if I see it, I'm going to reply back. And then you have those people who literally do not reply for like days or weeks, if ever. So there's two types of people in this world. Which type of person are you? But I am the type of person who like literally responds ASAP. So that very, very long rant is text me, be in my text message community. You can talk to me directly, 501-222-3362. I would love to connect with you. That is how I connect with so many of you, and I'm so unbelievably grateful. So I send my podcast each week. I send updates. You guys can literally send me anything and I will reply back to you. It's just a beautiful way for me to connect with you. But all of that to be said, oh my God, I don't even know where I'm fucking going. You guys, I am a tangenter on this podcast. I tangent all the time. I don't know. There's probably some of you who love it and probably some of you who are clearly skipped to the next podcast by now. But all of that to be said, today's podcast is just going to be a look back of the last 150 episodes, the last 2.5 years, what has changed in my life, what has changed in the business. I'm going to highlight some of you. I'm going to highlight some of our guests. I'm going to tell you things that you probably didn't know behind the scenes. What has changed? What has gone on since February 1st, 2021 up until now? This podcast, I think this 150 episode, I think will be coming out in August. I'm recording it in July. So there's been a lot of things that have gone on. So let's just kind of start with like what has changed in my personal life. And I have this written down. And what has changed in my personal life? Well, I've turned 40. There's that. I've gotten a lot more wrinkles. There's that. But I really feel like things have gotten really good in the last I guess, what is this? Is that 2.5 years? 21, 22, 23, 2.5 years. Holy fuck. I've been doing this podcast 2.5 years. We have had like, I think 80 or 90 something guests. I've done so many solo podcasts. I don't even know. I probably should have counted that. But like, let's just say we've had like 90 guests and the rest of them have been solo episodes with me. We've been putting out at least one, if not two a week for the last 2.5 years, which is insane to say. I am very proud of my consistency. And again, I'm very proud of you and thankful to you if you have listened to this podcast for this long. But what has changed in my life? What has changed in my life? I am doing things a little bit differently in my business. That is for sure. When I first started this podcast, I was doing a lot of masterminds. I was doing a lot of group coaching, and one-on-one was not the main focus. Now I'm only doing one-on-one coaching. And I'll tell you, like behind the scenes, that was like a really, really hard decision to make. Not because it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was just because, I'd always been doing masterminds, and masterminds are a great stream of revenue. It's a great way to serve a lot of people in one container, but I just felt like things were changing, and I knew that I literally am better at one-on-one than I am at anything else. And I think I was really hesitant to change to a one-on-one coaching model just simply because the revenue went down, and also because what would people think? And if I'm being 100% honest with you, that was in the back of my mind. I felt like I was letting people down. No, I wasn't like, what would people think? Like I cared what people were thinking, but like, what would people think that were in my community? Like, did they want just one-on-one coaching? And was I letting anyone down? And so that was a really big change that's happened and shifted over the last 2.5 years. And I will tell you, I've never been more grateful for that shift and that change. I feel like it was the best thing for me. And I feel like it was 100% the best thing for my clients. More one-on-one access, more in depth, where I get to know someone and I can see and witness all of the things. So I became the first person. I don't believe that there's anyone else in this space doing this. And so I could be wrong, but I believe I was the very first person to do a coaching membership, a one-on-one coaching membership. I don't know of anyone else in the industry that was doing that. So that has been a big shift, and it's been a huge blessing. I mean, in the beginning when I started it, I thought I would do one call every 2 months, but I've come to find out that like one call a month is what people really are getting a ton of result with. And it's a lot of what people are wanting. So when we first started, it was like one call every 2 months. But now the people that I'm signing on to the membership, it's one call per month for a whole year commitment, and people are loving it, and people are getting a ton of value out of it. And I'm super, super grateful. And it's kind of crazy to think that coming in February of next year or January of next year, like some of these people will have been doing this subscription for a year. So we're well over halfway point, which is really cool to see. And we only have like 1 or 2 spaces left, because at some point in time, I'm capping myself out. There's only so much time in the day. And something else that I have learned over the last 150 episodes is the fact that I really do value my time outside of business as much as I do value my time in the business. I did a podcast that really resonated with a lot of you. I don't know what episode it was, but it was a few episodes back. It was a solo episode where I talked about like there isn't an extra $100,000 or $200,000 in my life that could take precedence over spending time with my golf buddies, or spending time with my family, or spending time just outside being with people I love. And I think that really resonated with a lot of people, because I believe that I gave people permission to choose joy and happiness and alignment over choosing financial. And I will tell you, over the last 2.5 years of this podcast, it has been crazy town in the online coaching space. I feel like that there has just been so many shifts, and it's been really cool, because I feel like if you were to go back to episode 1 versus episode 150, my message is exactly the same. Clarity and confidence is the thing that you need in order to live in your God-given purpose. It is the thing that matters the most. It is the thing that I care about with my clients. I care more about my clients living in alignment with their life and living their purpose than I do with anything else. And when I focus in on that with my clients, that is when all of the abundance comes, the joy, the ease, the money, the relationships, all the things. And so I'm very, very proud of myself, to be honest with you, that I didn't jump on any of like all of the bullshit trains. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I don't need to call people out. I don't need to mention it. I don't need to do all that kind of stuff. But if you do know what I'm talking about in this coaching space, where the prices were astronomical and the promises were thin air, I will tell you that I'm very proud that nothing really shifted. And I'll be honest, my prices actually never changed. My prices have never changed really in the last 2 years. I've obviously kept the same price at the $558 for my coaching membership up until, my $22.97, where people get, 3 calls a month and unlimited access to me. Every call is valued at the exact same thing. The value and the result that you get is promised to you, and it is very clear and it's very transparent. I believe in transparent coaching. I believe in transparent pricing. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that I am afraid to charge these astronomical numbers. No, I believe the result that comes from the pricing is really fair and it's in alignment, and I feel really, really good about it. I love what I get to do, and my clients are getting results and they love it. And that's just the most important thing to me. And I will never regret that. And I'm so grateful that when people are backpedaling right now, I never had to backpedal for 1 second. So that's something that I'm really proud of over the last 150 episodes. I'll tell you that. One thing that has been hard, I guess maybe I'll go from like good to bad. Maybe it's not so bad, but one thing that has been like harder in this last 150 episodes is that I thought the podcast growth would be faster, to be honest with you. I obviously know that everything happens for a purpose and a reason, but I figured after 2.5 years, I would have had more downloads than we have. So we're going into, at the time of this, so obviously it will probably go up. It usually goes up by about anywhere between 600 and 1,200 downloads per week. So you can do the math on that. But we're sitting at roughly 75 to 80,000 downloads by the time that this comes out, maybe a pinch more. I really felt like we were going to get bigger numbers, bigger downloads than that. And I was even saying like we were close to 100,000 downloads like about a month or so ago. And obviously I didn't do my research enough and didn't realize that I think one of the weeks that we were looking at it, and I made the prediction based upon the downloads that week, was when we had a big podcast that came out. And by the way, I'm going to talk about like the top rated podcasts and the ones that people are really resonating with. But, I was basing the downloads upon that. And so, we have around 75, I think today we have about 75,000 downloads. So maybe by the time that this comes out, it'll probably be closer to 80,000 downloads. But in 150 episodes, some of you might think that that's amazing. And then other people might not think that that's great. And I'll be honest with you, I did expect our downloads to be more than that, because I was really hoping after 2.5 years and really putting time, energy, and effort into this podcast, especially our SEO, like the amount of money and time we spend on SEO backing this podcast, I really felt like our downloads would have been a lot more. We could have started advertising or monetizing in some way to the podcast. And so that has been a bit disappointing, to be 100% honest with you. I feel like I'm pretty consistent with this podcast. Well, I am very consistent with this podcast. We have an episode every single solitary week, but I do feel like, in really to get the big downloads, and, you need much more guests, you need higher guests that are probably going to share it more, or you need to put out a lot more episodes. I'm talking like every day or one every 2 days, a minimum 3 to 5 a week to really increase the downloads. And if I'm honest with you, I don't want to do that with the bandwidth that I have. I currently have, I think, 34, 35 one-on-one clients. I also like to play golf at least once a week. I have time on the weekends with my husband, and I would really have to probably put in 3 to 5 more hours per week to do more episodes to the podcast. So all of that to be said, I think everyone can kind of put themselves in the story of what is good or what is like successful. I definitely don't consider myself not successful. I know that we've touched so many people with this podcast, and that's something I'm going to talk about. The amount of it could bring me to tears, the amount of people that have resonated with this podcast and have sent me messages either on Instagram or emails or in the text message community. So perhaps you are someone who has been touched by this podcast over the last 150 episodes. When I tell you, and I hope you guys listened to the episode a couple of weeks ago, hasn't come out yet, but by the time this does, you will have heard it. Katara, she was on the Katira, sorry, like Shakira. She always tells me like Shakira. Katira was on this podcast and she said that she has listened to every episode or close to for the last year and a half, and she'd never sent me a message up until about maybe 2 months ago. And the fact that it's impacting so many people, I'm so unbelievably grateful. So I can't look at it as, it's not as successful as I wanted it to be from the actual like statistical point of monetization or downloads. I know it is going out to the right people. I have had so many messages over the last 2.5 years, and I'm unbelievably grateful to you. So please don't think for a second that your message doesn't matter to me, because your message is the reason why I keep going, to be 100% honest with you. Because there are days, and if you have listened to a recent solo episode where I was like, fuck this, I am never doing this. Why am I doing a video? Why am I continuing to do this stupid podcast that doesn't like monetize, that I'm spending 500, 600, 700, I don't even know. No, I do know. It's about $500 a month to produce this podcast. Why am I doing this? This is so stupid, like all of the things. And then I get a message from someone who says, this podcast has been so helpful for me. It's helped me decide it's my turn. And obviously I know that I've gotten a lot of clients from listening to this podcast, which is great. So it's, if you're looking at it from like the funnel standpoint, it's definitely the top of the funnel. It's a free resource that anyone can listen to get to know me. So all of that to be said, I thought this podcast would have grown faster. So I wish that it would have, to be honest with you, but I'm also not going anywhere. And one thing that I tell all of my clients, and I probably said it on this podcast before, is that one touch of God's favor can change everything. So I never know when that one touch of God's favor is coming. And perhaps that'll never come, but I do know that there's a purpose and a reason. And so perhaps maybe you getting the message you need is the purpose and the reason for me doing this. And I hope everyone puts themselves in that story. So sometimes perhaps there's something that you're doing that you wish would go a different way, but you know what? Maybe it's not about you. I always tell my husband, you know what? It's not about us. And the minute we can make it not about us, it seems way easier for us than it is. I don't know if you can understand that, but I always say the minute you not make it about you, it becomes so much easier. When I make this podcast about me, when I make this podcast about my downloads, about my monetization, it's just fucking all in my head. And it's so selfish and it never works out the way that I need to. And then when I get out of my head and say, Christina, this is not about you. This is a calling inside of you that you are like chosen to do this work. And whether you understand it or get it or not, that's what it is. And you just have to understand that you may never understand, but you have to do this because it's not about you. And so my husband and I talk about that quite a bit. And Nathan, he's been on this podcast many a times. He's been the most repeated guest, and you guys have loved him and enjoy him. And I'm so grateful that I get to do life with him. And I'm so grateful that he spends his time to be on this podcast and definitely be on my social media. I did a reel recently, or a post or story or whatever it was recently, where I said, half of you son of a bitches don't even engage with me. And then when my husband's on my Instagram, you guys are like, yes, love Nathan, this, that, and the other. I'm like, wait a minute. Do y'all love him more than you love me? Which, hey, I get it. You probably do love him more than me because he's funny as shit, and you should love him more than me because he's fabulous. And I'm very, 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 very lucky that he's my husband. So that was one of the things that I figured this podcast would have grown more. But again, put yourself in the story of perhaps it's not for you. And maybe our growth will never hit 1 million downloads. Maybe we will never fast forward, but there's maybe something behind it. Not maybe, there is something behind it and the reason for it. And I can put 100% trust in that. So I will say one thing that I never expected from this podcast, that I honestly, if you would have told me our biggest podcast, well, Jamie Johnson, my good buddy, Jamie Johnson, who has the most quotable quote ever on this podcast for sure, still has the highest amount of downloads. However, slowly but surely, he is getting caught by the Clinton Anderson podcast. So if you would have told me 2 years ago that my highest or almost highest rated podcast would have been with a foul mouth, way worse than me, Australian in the horse industry, I would have told you you're fucking crazy. But you never know how or why things are going to happen. But the Clinton Anderson podcast has been really one of our most highly, and there was it was a 2-episode part, and I was actually on his podcast. His podcast was taped live in video. His episode that we showed on this podcast, the Decide It's Your Turn podcast, has done very well. It was video as well. You guys can watch that on YouTube. But I was on his show. He was on my show. I would have never have guessed in all my wildest dreams that was going to be the podcast that was, the most downloaded. And I got a whole new audience out of that podcast. And it's crazy. I've actually gotten a few clients out of it. There's so many people that would have never known about the power of coaching and mindset work, that would have literally never known that my industry even existed if it wasn't for Clinton Anderson. So I'm super grateful for that. So that was something over the last 150 episodes that was so surprising, to be honest with you. The Jamie Johnson one was not surprising because Jamie is obviously extremely famous. He is one of the, most well-known country music singers that there is. So that one wasn't super surprising. But the Clinton Anderson one, that definitely caught me, totally out of left field. And I'm super, super grateful for it because I really did enjoy that episode. And I know that so many of you got so many takeaways from that podcast. Clinton, not everyone agrees with everything he says. I don't agree with everything he says. But the man is smart in business and he really does want to serve people. And so I'm super grateful for that podcast. That was kind of cool. Another podcast that did really, really well was the 75 Hard podcast. So when I turned 40 last summer, Nathan and I, it's so crazy. I am sitting at almost a year from us being finished last year. At this time, we finished August 4th or something last year. And by the time this podcast comes out, it had been over a year that we have done the 75 Hard. So that was a crazy podcast that did really, really well because so many people were interested in the 75 Hard program. That is an Andy Frisella program. If you don't know about it, you can go back and check out that podcast. I did beginning, middle, and end type of podcast, right when we started, the middle, and then the finale of what our experience was with 75 Hard. Newsflash, I lost 0 weight and looked exactly the same, which is very much a piss off. However, my husband was completely transformed. So if you're looking at it as just a weight loss program, sorry, it doesn't work that way. But if you're looking at it as a complete transformation, it was a fabulous program. So that was a cool, that was cool to know that you guys really resonated with that podcast. Obviously, a lot of people have done that program. Andy is really, promoted that program well. The book, there's so much, but it's kind of crazy that those are 2 of the biggest podcasts. In the last 150 episodes, I'm so grateful. We've had what I consider a lot of celebrities on this podcast. We have had a lot of friends on this podcast. I have done this podcast in 3 rooms of my house. We're finally doing it back in my office again because I'm recording on Zoom so we can put these on YouTube. So I no longer have to record upstairs in my spare bedroom closet. We've gone through 3 microphones on this podcast. This is most recent. If you're watching on YouTube, this is a $300 microphone that apparently is going to make our audio that much better. So that's something that has happened over the last 3 years. We've gone through a lot of things on this podcast. We've gone through an external video. The same laptop. Thank you, Jesus. I haven't to invest in a new one of those, but there's been a bunch of new things. We've been in 3 different rooms of this house. We've done it via YouTube. Now we're on YouTube. I mean, it just keeps evolving and changing, and I'm super grateful for it. But, this year on the podcast, we've had a kid on the podcast. My client, Rochelle, her daughter, Brianne, was on the podcast. That was so, so cool. We've done a group podcast. So when I used to do retreats, I'm not doing a retreat this year. I'm just doing VIP days for certain clients or people who are looking for those in-person one-on-one retreats. So I'm only doing a couple of those this year. I have 1 left through the year. So if you're interested in a one-on-one 3-day in-person VIP day with me, VIP weekend, send me a message for that. You can send me a text message. You want to be on my text text message community because it's me and you chatting. 501-222-3362. I call it a very bougie business write-off if you want to spend 2 days and 3 nights with me. That sounded really bad. No, you're not with me per se, but we make it a bougie weekend to dive into your life and your business. But so we've done a group podcast. So we did a retreat group podcast. That was super fun to get everyone's perspective on a retreat and like the coaching experience of a retreat. That was really cool. We did that. I've had a few returning guests, which is really cool. I've had, if I'm going to be 100% honest, I will never tell you who they are, but I've had a few regret guests on this podcast, to be honest with you. I will never tell you who they are, but there has been a couple people that I was like, that didn't go as I expected. There has been one there's only been one podcast ever. And again, you'll never know, but there has been one podcast ever that I recorded that I told my team, I'm sorry, we can't use this. And I told this person very politely, I am like, I'm so sorry. This is just not in alignment for my audience. And it's just not what I'm willing to put out. And the person understood. It just wasn't the right time, to be honest with you. I have done a podcast with one of my good friends, Sarah Faith, in my bedroom closet in our pajamas. I have done a podcast where my clients have interviewed me. So if you were listening to the podcast last October and November, I had taken 3 weeks out of the business to travel overseas. I went to Africa, the Maldives, and Dubai. Yes, bucket list fucking trip. Be sure to listen to that episode of how I manifested that bucket list trip. And that trip, yes, it was so bougie and it was beautiful and it was amazing. But I mean, that was like a 5-year trip in the making. And it is crazy how I have manifested a ton of things like that in my life. It's amazing the power of manifestation, action, decision, faith, and action. The 3 trademark pillars of my business: decision, faith, and action. It is amazing what can happen when you actually implement those things. But last fall, when I was on that bucket list trip for 3 weeks, we had a client series where my clients interviewed me. And so we did 5 episodes where my clients were interviewing me, and we answered a lot of questions on those. So you guys can go back. We called it the client files last fall on the episode. So if you didn't hear those, you can go back and check those out. Those ones, episodes with my clients or my friends or, when my clients are interviewing me or whatever, so on and so forth, they don't get a ton of downloads like as popular as like a Tommy Lahren or a Bozeman St. John or a Jamie Johnson or Clinton Anderson. Those ones are going to attract a different audience. But if you are my like ride or die people, and I'd love to know who you are, like I swear from the bottom of my heart, I would love to hear from you. Because it's what keeps me going. You people are what keeps me going on this, because clearly our downloads aren't big enough and may not ever be in order to really kind of take this podcast to the next level unless we change a lot of things. And I don't have any desire to do that. You guys know, if you've been here for a while, you know that I am very in alignment with what I truly want in this world. That's what I coach. That's what I help people with. I mean, if you don't know what you want, you're going to get whatever comes to you. And so clarity is really, really big. And clarity takes away a lot of imposter. This is coaching 101, folks. Clarity takes away imposter syndrome. Clarity takes away, jealousy and all of the things, because when you're clear on what you want, you can focus in on get what you truly want, not what everyone else has. And I think that is one of my gifts. But all of that to be said, some of the best podcasts that I think that I've done, and the ones that you, my real true audience, who are probably my true audience who is listening to the 150th episode to kind of get like the backstory of like what has gone on behind the scenes over the last, 2.5 years. I promise you, those episodes do sometimes the best when it's really, really hitting home with you, my loyal listener. I mean, you guys love getting the real people doing real things who are just like you. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this podcast really, even though we don't have this massive reach, we also have a I've always said to people on my social media platform, I've always said I have a very engaged, loyal audience. And if you are one of those people, I literally thank you so much. And if you know me, if you've either worked with me as a client or you're one of my friends or whatever it is, or we've engaged on social media, you know what I'm saying is very true. I got a message from a girl the other day who I've known in my community a really long time. I never worked with her, but she said, I've been following you for like 3 years and everything you say is exactly the same shit over and over and over and over. And you're the same person. I mean, I'll be honest, there's a lot of shit online and people change so much and their messaging changes and like what they're putting out changes. And there's nothing wrong with changing. Like over the last 2.5 years, I've changed. I mean, obviously I've grown in different ways. What the way in which I coach, like the container in which I coach has changed. I mean, like you have to change. Changing is growing, right? But also too, like my core values, the things that I believe and the things that I talk about have not changed because you can't change that. You can't fake that for a very long period of time. And so for those of you who have, listened to this podcast for such a long time, I appreciate you and I thank you. And you are the ones who really resonate with the people on this podcast that aren't big names, but are telling their true stories and have had these situations happen, whether there be clients of mine, whether it be girlfriends of mine, you are really resonating with those people. And I'm always going to give those people a voice because those people are just like you and just like me. So I'm super, super grateful for that. So, one of the big things like that we have done over the last, little while now is we're doing solos on YouTube. That's a big change over the last 2.5 years. And I think that is a positive. My team's getting a lot more content that they can use. Thank God, because you would think that I have so much fucking content because I've shown up on social media every single solitary day for the last 5.5, 6 years. But now we're getting more pieces of content that they can really use and repurpose on YouTube and shorts and TikToks and all the things that I don't even own the TikTok app. So our TikTok probably does suck, but Instagram and YouTube, we're really trying to grow that. But I'm so grateful for even our big name celebrities. Like you guys, you've probably, if you've listened to some of those big episodes, like I feel like I've gotten better at podcasting. Obviously I fucking should have because it's been 2.5 years, but I don't think I was as good 2.5 years ago as I am today. And I'm always growing and learning. And I have a tendency to, just can't wait for the next thing to say. And I sometimes lose my train of thought. I feel like that's like, I swear to God, you guys, this is a true statement. I have literally gone to a doctor because I was afraid that I was losing my memory. But he says, because my grandma, unfortunately passed away of Alzheimer's. It runs in our family. And so I literally was like, I got to go check my shit out. And do you know that he has more people in his office? So I went to like a brain surgeon special, like not brain surgeon, but an Alzheimer memory loss specialist, got like the fucking CAT scan, the whole deal. Like I paid for the whole kit and caboodle. Let's just say my deductible for my insurance was like hit that day. And he's like, no, your memory is fine. He's like, do you know that the majority of people that come into my office are women around the age of 40? And I was like, why? He's like, he didn't say this exactly verbatim, but I'm just going to say it my way. You son of a bitches are so overwhelmed trying to do so many things that you can't remember what you were supposed to be doing. And I was like, oh my God, isn't that the fucking truth? Women, and I don't even have kids so to you mothers, oh my God, I can't even imagine. So yes, I do lose my train of thought quite often. I hope I don't come off bad. I don't really listen to a ton of the podcast very often. I will say I sometimes listen to the introduction of the podcast to make sure the team did it right and it was the right one, because I'm just kind of anal like that, because I always just want things to be really well and I can trust my team. But every once in a while I listen to the beginning, and sometimes I just think to myself, I really don't want to listen because I know that I like tangent off on these crazy tangents. So please let me know. Do you like my tangents? Do you kind of get sick of my tangents? Do you like it? Does it make you laugh? Are you just like, this girl is crazy? I can't believe I listened to this fucking chick. Like, let me know. Let me know. I promise you. This is really, really helpful. I think that one of the things that is like, I don't know if it's like a negative or anything, but something that has changed that I think over the last 2.5 years, especially, is the fact that I don't think it's a negative thing, but like I really don't pay a ton of attention to what else is going on in the podcast world, in the coaching world. I really don't listen to anyone else's podcast. I think I've kind of hit a point where I'm not listening to a ton of podcasts. I definitely don't read a ton of books anymore. You guys, I went from literally reading like a book, oh God, I want to say like a week or maybe even 2 in a week when I was so like learning. And now it's just more about like, I can trust myself to show up, to know the things. Like I'm constantly learning to help my clients, but it's in a different capacity, I think. And so one thing that I think I've done that maybe I'm missing trends in the podcast world, maybe I'm doing something, maybe I could be growing the podcast more if I was paying attention to more podcasts, but there's very few people in the online space. There's very few people I really want to follow. When I'm listening to podcasts now, that a lot of them are just to relax at the end of the day, because I'm so grateful that, I'm on 4 to 5 hours, sometimes longer. Most days I try not to be any longer than 6 hours on client calls, but sometimes I just need to like decompress. The Calm Down podcast, which I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I listened to the Bethany Frankel podcast. I really, really like Bethany Frankel. I know a lot of people don't, but I really like her. I think she's a freaking badass business person. And then I listen to Kelly Stafford's podcast. There's a few podcasts that are kind of sports comedy type of based podcasts that I really, really enjoy. And then I also listen to like a lot of podcasts that my husband listens to, very much like business podcasts when it comes to real estate and investing and money and all of that kind of stuff. I don't talk about it a ton, and I maybe should, but I feel like I might leave a few people out. But I talk a lot with my clients about taxes and 1031 tax exchanges and how like I don't want to pay taxes at the end of the year. So like, what am I doing in order to work with a great accounting team that does, my sister-in-law, she is one of the best accountants in the state of Arkansas. And she's really not an accountant. Like, she's not the person who does the math. She's the person who literally looks at your business and goes, okay, how do we tax plan for the rest of the year so you don't have to like get yammed with taxes at the end of the year. I love talking about that with my clients because, this isn't something that I learned in my life. My parents didn't really know anything about financial education. They didn't know anything. And I've really come to enjoy a lot of this because I've learned a ton from my husband. This is the world in which he exists. And it's fun to me. It's exciting to learn. And, I just think that everyone has, a really bad taste in their mouth when it comes to money. And that's the reason why I think over the last year, especially like on my social media, I've been talking about money more because I understand that, most people come to me because they want to make money in some regard. And I also understand that making money is really, honest to God, not that hard. And I know I say that and it fucking pisses some people off, but the reason why money is hard for a lot of people is because of the stories around money. And I know that there's certain people that are like, I got no stories and that, how do you say that? But like, I promise you, it's 100% the truth. I've been around a lot of really wealthy people. Like, the online space, we talk about wealthy people, but like, I'm talking about fuck you, wealthy people. And I'll tell you, like, a person who has a money mindset that money's not hard to make and that you can have fuck you kind of money. Like, I remember a buddy of mine literally saying, money's not that hard to make. What's hard is deciding what you're going to do with your money when you pass away. And that's a conversation my husband and I have been having a lot lately because we don't have children. I'll tell you, this is a very, very difficult, hard conversation to have when you have wealth. And I'm not saying I have this crazy amount of wealth, but I know a lot of people who do. And wealth is, a lot of people when they get to a point about having wealth, they're more worried about like how it's going to affect generations because, whether you like it or not, and this isn't like a true statistic, but when you have wealth, there's going to be some people who are going to do good with it, and there's going to be some people that do not so good with it. In every family nowadays, you've got some people who are very successful and some people who, don't do good things. And it's in every family, no matter how wealthy or how poor you are, there's going to be some people, it's just statistics, right? It's just math. Like you put 10 siblings out there, a couple of them are probably going to be very successful and a couple of them are probably going to be not in the greatest place. And it's just an interesting conversation to have, and it's a hard conversation. And so that's a lot of times what I'm talking to clients about. Like there's a lot of times we're just talking about like the business behind the business and the mindset behind the business. And I get excited about that now. I want to learn more about it. I want to be the person who, talks about these kind of things because money is a big deal. And I think once you kind of get to a level in life where you understand that like you can make money, you can hold money, you can handle money, then it's a whole different type of conversation. The money is no longer about like having enough of it. It's about having a different type of conversation. Like, how do you take care of future generations? What does this look like? What legacy are you leaving? Men, I think, have a very much different mindset on that. A lot of women want to just make sure their family is taken care of. And a lot of guys, and even my husband, like very much like, what is the legacy they're leaving? I'd love to know your guys' perspective on this. I am less concerned, and I don't know if this is good or bad, so take it for what it is, but this is my opinion and my belief. I don't care a ton about the legacy I'm leaving. And I know I don't have children, and perhaps it would be different if I did. But my husband doesn't have children either, but he cares so much about the legacy that he's leaving in this world. I care so much about the impact that I'm making currently. And maybe I should say this, maybe I shouldn't, but you guys know me. I'm just going to say it anyway. I don't really care what my legacy is after I'm dead and gone. I care so much about what my legacy is today. I care so much about the impact that I'm making today, whether it be a person at the grocery store, whether it be my neighbor, whether it be my clients, whether it be someone online, whether it be someone I'm shaking their hand with. Like, I care so deeply about the impact that I'm leaving today versus the impact that I'm leaving when I'm dead and gone. Obviously, that will, resonate or whatever, however you want to look at it. But my husband cares so much about like, how are you going to be remembered? Like, this is a big boy thing. I think boys care a lot about like, what is their legacy and their name and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it's just it's so important to me to leave a daily legacy rather than like when I'm dead and gone. Like, I hope people miss me. I'm sure there'll be like a handful, if my parents are still here by the time I die, they'll miss me for sure. My husband will miss me, but I hope I don't ever have to deal with any of that. I hope I'm gone before all the people that I love, and that's very selfish. But yeah, I just want to leave an impact on the people that I'm here with today, and that means a lot to me. So I know that was a tangent. That was one of my many tangents on this podcast. What else has changed in the last 150 episodes? You guys have changed in the last 150 episodes. Who I'm resonating with has changed in the last 150 episodes. My community has always shifted and changed. I think my community is changing with me. I remember my hairdresser, who I love and adore. She was one of my very first clients. I love her so much still to this day. I told her she can charge me whatever, and if she moves, I guess I'm just going to have to fly to her every 6 to 7 weeks. But I remember she said that her clientele has aged with her, and she's like, yeah, I haven't really, because she's so booked out, like you cannot, like no one of us is going to have to die in order to get in with my hairdresser. Let's just say that. And my hair looks so bad today because I just got done for a walk, so don't look at my hair. But all of that to be said is her clients have aged with her. So she's noticed her clients getting gray. You guys, I do not have gray. And if I do, I'm just going to die not knowing that, because I've told her before, and newsflash, I probably fucking do. But if she tells me that, I'm just going to like die on the spot. So, but her clients have aged with her. Her clients have changed with her. Her clients have gone through different seasons with her. And I feel like my community sometimes is always shifting and changing. Like I said on this podcast, like one of the highest downloaded podcasts in the last year and a half has been this Clinton Anderson podcast. So I'm having a whole new demographic of people coming in. I used to be very sports heavy. Obviously, you guys know if you've been here a while as a former professional golfer or in the golf scene, in the corporate golf scene, I mean, television, golf, all the things. I used to have a different, demographic that followed me. So it's been fun to see and witness how like things have changed over the years, who I'm resonating with and who I'm not. So that's been kind of fun too. So either way, I feel like I've touched all the bases. I have like, I have some notes here and I feel like I've hit them all. A lot of things have changed on my side. I used to have, well, I still have her as my coach. My coach I've worked with for the last 4 years. I'm not with her as much anymore. So a lot of my clients, my long time clients, they go down from 3 calls a month down to 2 or 1 or whatever it is. And I've done the same with my coach. I'm doing just intensive sessions with her now. And I'm leaning more into some therapy now because there's certain things that I'm working on that, my business is very simple. My business model is very simple. The strategy in which I use is very simple. And so I'm leaning more into that, and it's a different season. And I think that that's cool to be able to do. My longest client ever, I'd been working with her for, I think, 3.5 years. She and I have recently decided to take a break. She's doing something different. I love her to death, but it's been really cool to see that I've had new faces that I get to serve. I'm sure it's, supportive for her and supportive for me. The same thing with my coach. I don't need Lacey all the time, 3 times a month anymore. And so now I'm just with her more on a intensive base session a few times a year. So that has shifted over the last, year and a half. And it's not good or bad. It's just what it is. And I'm super grateful that, I'm not a person, and I know that this client, my longest running client ever, I know that she is doing something different right now. And it's not like she's jumping to go to a different coach because she thinks there's a big shiny object somewhere else. And it's the same thing with me and Lacey. It's just, I don't need that much, support anymore in that regard. And so I always say, have a coach who has a coach. Well, have a coach who has a coach on retainer and a coach who has a therapist and a coach, because it's just a different season in my life. And so that's really cool to be able to say that, I'm in a different season right now where I'm working on different things, my business. And that's what I want for a lot of my clients who have come to me for business. I want your business to be so good that after a couple of years, we don't need to work together anymore because your business has processes, procedures, and every business is different. My business really isn't scaling to anything else. This other client, she hired another support team to get her to a next level that I wasn't an expert in. And so, that's been something that's been different and changed. I think the one thing that I have always done well, and I probably will always continue to do well, and it's everything that I talk about with you guys, is I'm just very clear and I'm very confident that if I want something, I will get clear on it. I will be controlling the things that I can control. I will always work on my mindset. I will always invest in myself. I will always make sure that I have the support so I can lead a life that is the best and highest version of myself. At the end of the day, something that I have always talked about, that I always will talk about, is that life is short and you have a God-given responsibility. And when there is something put on my heart that it is my job to lean into, just like I encourage you, decide it is your turn to do the damn thing and take any and all means in order to do it, and find the support. Work on the mindset blocks, work on getting clear. And at the end of the day, be clear, be confident, decide it's your turn. You guys, I am unbelievably grateful that you have chosen to listen to this podcast, whether it be for the first time today at 150 episodes, or you are one of my OGs who have listened to all 150 episodes. Please, 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 just for one time. I won't bug you. I definitely won't try to sell you shit. I just want you to say hi. I just want you to say, hey, I've listened to the podcast, or hey, I've listened to the podcast once or 150 times, or 20 times, whatever it is, or whatever episode has resonated the most with you. I would love to hear from you. You can send me a text message, 501-222-3362. It is 100% me. It is 100% not spammy. Ask everyone on the fucking list. You're supposed to get one text message a week. Well, sometimes it only happens once every 2 weeks because I sometimes fucking forget. But if you send me a message, I promise you I will reply back to you. I am unbelievably grateful for you. You guys can check out my website, every podcast that we've done. All of the show notes are on the website, ChristinaLecuyer.com, LECUYER.com. This is all in our show notes. Come say hi to me on Instagram, or tell me you're watching this YouTube video, because again, I'm consistent as a motherfucker. I am not going anywhere. I'm so thankful for my podcast guy, Jake. He is my guy who's been editing these clips, putting amazing little cover photos on them. Shit that I do not want to do. Could I figure it out? Absolutely. Will I? Absolutely not. So I'm so grateful for Jake. You guys, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I can't wait until we get to do episode number 300. I'm going to be much more older and much more wrinkled, or I'm going to just, get a facelift by then. Anyway, you guys, I'm so unbelievably grateful. Thank you again. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here. And don't ever forget, you have the power to decide. It is your turn.